Welcome to the first ever edition of Forgotten Realms lore. With the recent release of Baldur's Gate 3, it seems like an appropriate start to focus our efforts on understanding everyone's favorite cosmic horror-inspired eldritch squid heads, the Illithid. Part 1. What are the Illithid? Numerous articles attempt to dissect the distinction between a Mind Flayer and an Illithid. In strict terms, no difference exists. Illithid is the Drowish term for Mind Flayer, potentially just a loanword exchanged between common or undercommon and Drowish. While certain sources label Illithid as an undercommon word, this detail is tangential. Effectively, they are identical. Biologically, Illithid result from the seromorphosis of an Illithid tadpole within an intelligent being. Sentient humanoids yield the principal form of Illithid, or what's commonly associated with the term Mind Flayer. The culmination of their life cycle is the giant tentacled elder brain, a creature of profound intellect and expansive psychic reach. Initially, Illithid tadpoles are non-sentient psychic parasites undergoing metamorphosis based on their consumed food source or host. Seromorphosis is triggered when a tadpole feeds on a living host's brain. Normally housed within an elder brain tank, after hatching from Mind Flayer eggs, tadpoles engage in cannibalism. They either perish or mature over a decade. Elder brains and tadpole sustenance overlap, and brains from Mind Flayer victims supplement the tadpoles, while the elder brain feeds on tadpoles exclusively. When mature, tadpoles are selected for seromorphosis and implanted into a host. Familiar Illithid forms are roughly human-sized beings with a humanoid build. Over a short period, an Illithid tadpole consumes the host's gray matter, effectively supplanting it. Seromorphosis transforms the host's biology over roughly 2 decades. The head morphs into a squid-like form with 4 tentacles enveloping a circular maw, the means by which the Mind Flayer feeds on sentient prey's brains. Skin changes to a pale blue or purple hue and becomes soft and rubbery. Organs rearrange into unfamiliar structures to support the new form. Seromorphosis results in more than just the standard Mind Flayers. Illithid sought to create more of their own, but they also recognized the advantages of taking more diverse forms, resulting in various alien aberrations. Notably, gnome seromorphs retain the host's personality and alignment. However, they would gain psychic abilities and increased intellect. The gnome seromorph would still require intelligent brains as a food source, but it would otherwise retain the desires, goals, and intentions of the original host. Other creatures such as lizard folk, dragons, beholders can transform into different psychic monsters after tadpole exposure and seromorphosis. Parasitized lizard folk would give rise to the Tsakandi, an evolved form akin to an upgraded thrall, wielding both enhanced physical capabilities and a diverse array of psionic powers to serve their Illithid masters. Tadpoles of a more aggressive nature, having endured to maturity, were deemed optimal for the creation of Tsakandi. Conversely, implanted dragons would transform into brain-stealer dragons, formidable creatures capable of challenging even elder brains for control over Illithid communities. Although their wings would atrophy into vestigial structures and their breath weapon loses its original destructiveness, the Illithid dragon's Mind Blast would gain remarkable potency alongside heightened psionic abilities. Moreover, influenced beholders would give rise to mind witnesses, proficient in psychically manipulating numerous individuals simultaneously while retaining the multifaceted ocular talents characteristic of beholders. However, generating mind witnesses in the Illithid society posed a drawback, as these creatures remained entirely subservient and susceptible to becoming pawns of rival Mind Flayers or joining a clade of other psionic creatures. Seromorphosis isn't the only type of metamorphosis that the Illithid can undergo, however. One other interesting trait is that if left unchecked, Illithid tadpoles will cannibalize one another and grow larger as they do so. Such a situation isn't a common outcome for the Illithid tadpole, however, depending on the collapse of an Illithid community after the death of their elder brain. After consuming enough of their tadpole cousins, a particular tadpole would grow to around 4 feet, where it would be capable of surviving outside of the elder brain tank, much like a slug surviving on land. Having never undergone seromorphosis, they remained non-sentient However, they did still possess strong psionic abilities akin to Mind Flayers. They tended to stick within groups of other Illithocytes who they could communicate with telepathically, though as a non-sentient creature, one could only imagine what that sort of communication would actually look like. The Illithocyte were also capable of reproducing more tadpoles, and so they could maintain their existence long after the fall of an Illithid society. The Illithocyte was not the final form of the frenzied tadpole cannibalism, though. If a single tadpole persisted in consuming its peers, surpassing them in size and persisting beyond the confines of the tank, it would continue its predatory habits among the denizens of the Underdark. Should it attain a substantial size and encounter a sentient being fit for consumption, a further metamorphosis would transpire, leading to the birth of a neothelid. This colossal worm would devour the brains of any creatures it encountered, achieving a measure of self-awareness through consuming a sentient being. Despite its increased awareness, the neothelid maintained a diminished intellect, rendering it insusceptible to detection by an elder brain. As a consequence, the neothelid would emerge as a rival to the elder brain, akin to the brain stealer dragon, albeit lacking any inclination to sustain Illithid society, viewing Mind Flayers merely as an additional food source for sustenance. As we delve deeper into this narrative, we encounter the enigmatic elder brain, a creature we've touched upon with restraint thus far. As you're aware, the elder brain represents the culminating stage of the Illithid life cycle. However, it's crucial to recognize that not every Illithid is capable of initiating the intricate process of elder brain formation. This intricate transformation commences with the emergence of a particularly potent strain of Illithid known as the Illitharid, bearing a resemblance to the more recognizable Mind Flayers we hold affection for. Illitharids stand as a testament to augmentation, distinguished by their 6 tentacles, each surpassing the length of their 4 tentacled counterparts, and towering above the average Illithid. These beings also boast an extended lifespan, living twice as long. Beyond their physical stature, Illitharid command heightened physical and psychic prowess, effectively ascending to the upper echelons of the Illithid societal hierarchy. So you may have gathered by now that the Illitharid have something to do with the formation of an elder brain. Well, being that all of Illithid society are composed of self-obsessed, megalomaniacal, evil geniuses, it stands to reason that the upper echelon of Illithid society wouldn't always get along, sometimes vying with one another or competing for control of an Illithid community. This is where the particularly disgruntled Illitharid may decide to leave their Illithid community and start a new one, in which case it is imperative that an Illitharid leave with a following of other Mind Flayers to tend to it once it reaches its altered state. The new breakaway cult of Illithid will gather round their Illitharid leader, who, once finding a suitable location for a new city, will use a special staff to extract its own brain while still alive. Now, it's important that it doesn't die of old age before doing this, or else the brain won't be strong enough for what happens next. Using its staff, the Illitharid would extract its own brain while standing in a newly constructed brain tank. Its brainless body would then be implanted with the connected staff and brain, and would then dissolve into a psionic ichor that formed the basis for the elder brain's brine pool. I want to point out that it's kind of interesting how the staff is implanted in the body of the Illitharid. It kind of reminds me of how the tadpoles are implanted into a host. Is this a symbolic ritual, or is the implantation of the staff necessary? It's hard to say how much of this process is ritualistic and how much is instinctual. In any case, the Illitharid brain will at this point begin growing into an elder brain. The elder brain is effectively the leader of any given society of Mind Flayers. Yes, it may have some competitors for leadership, as we have already gone over. However, it is important to note that for the most part, elder brains are the leaders. When the elder brain dies, the society collapses, and a new society must form. While they are helpless in a sense, requiring thralls and the like to tend on them, the elder brain will continue to absorb more psychic energy. As each member of its community dies, the other Mind Flayers will attempt to extract the brains of their fallen kin and put them into the tank with the elder brain. The brain will then absorb the gray matter of the Mind Flayer brain. This ritual is considered in the highest regard of all Mind Flayers, as they look forward to joining the amalgamation of minds in the hopes of joining the Elder Brain's hive of many personalities and intellects. In reality, this is all a facade, however. The Elder Brain's identity is solidified early on in its growth from the original Illithid brain. The other brains which join it simply have their intellect and psychic abilities absorbed into the Elder Brain, while its personality is washed away. A final cruel twist on what began as a cruel creation, starting with the implantation of an Illithid tadpole in an unwilling host. By this point, you may be a little overwhelmed with the answer to the question, what are the Illithid? While answering this question required poring over several manuals, wikis, and Reddit posts, I would urge you to not take all of this information as gospel, as they are essentially intended to be a somewhat mysterious creature, and as such, information is often changing or incomplete. There are many more forms and many more intricacies of the Illithid, which I haven't gone over, as this video was supposed to be more of a general guide than a complete source. Just this section of the video alone could be many times longer, and there are more sections we must yet explore. Part 2. Origins. The Illithid's origin is shrouded in ambiguity, a haze fueled in part by the evolving lore across editions that occasionally retcon or revisits past narratives. This enigmatic aspect of the Illithid plays a significant role in the confusion that ensues, particularly when unraveling their origin story. Or, to be more accurate, the lack thereof. A defining attribute of the Illithid is their resolute otherness, existing in a stage of profound alienation from our understanding. Their physiology, thought process, and even their very point of origin are shrouded in an impenetrable veil of mystery. Exploring the roots of the Mind Flayer leads us to the 2nd edition Spelljammer campaign, a setting that thrusts the Illithid into the forefront as a prominent spacefaring empire. Within this setting, the Illithid traverse the cosmos, engaging in trade or asserting dominance over other races. Their existence takes on a more symbiotic hue in the interstellar fabric of the prime material plane, contrasting with their terrestrial counterparts. Here, they collaborate and coexist with others, strategically building their empire through advantageous alliances and prosperous trade partnerships. Intriguingly, these spacefaring Illithid often regard their earthbound kin with a measure of disdain. This sentiment arises from a perception that terrestrial Illithid societies are too linear and myopic in their fixation on world domination, incapable of partaking in the broader aspiration of achieving complete planar dominance. Such a monumental undertaking demands subtlety, prompting the spacefaring Illithid to occasionally conceal their true nature, at least to a certain extent. But if the Illithid are advanced spacefaring beings, then how come they're still on Toril, and so insignificant compared to the empires of Faerun, I hear you asking? The tale of the Illithid spacefaring empire takes an intriguing twist in the fact that, well, things didn't work out. It encountered the bittersweet taste of failure, as even the mightiest of dominions eventually face a descent into decline. But how does a society brimming with megalomaniacal cephalopodic entities grapple with the unraveling of their ambitious endeavors? The answer, seemingly, is woven in the fabric of time itself. Time travel, that is. It can never be so easy, though, can it? It's worth noting that this theory hasn't been canonically ratified. Nonetheless, it's reasonable to acknowledge that the elements of eldritch enigma and cosmic fascination are intrinsic to the Illithid, as perceived through the discerning lens of Wizards of the Coast. In light of this, the time travel conjecture assumes a remarkably credible stance. It holds some water, or perhaps brain juice if we were to maintain the aquatic brain theme. Among the paramount aspirations of the Illithid is an aspiration for dominion over all life forms. In a time where their ambitions seemed tantalizingly within reach, the looming specter of inevitable failure began to cast its shadow. Faced with this grim reality, a daring solution emerged, a journey back through time, a second chance to shape the course of destiny. Now, the 4th edition had a different take on space travel in the realms, essentially replacing the astral realm with space. But to my understanding, that's mostly been retconned or repurposed, and the 2nd edition lore has largely been re-established in 5th edition. But that brings us to origin point number 2 for the Illithid, the Far Realm. The Far Realm emerges as a plane that, as depicted in artistic renderings, teems with floating eyeballs, undulating tentacles, and an overall atmosphere of unbridled madness. It's almost akin to a planar mirror of familiar aberrations such as Mind Flayers and Beholders. In certain accounts, the origins of aberrations are traced back to this enigmatic realm. A compelling theory posits that prolonged exposure to the Far Realm transforms non-native denizens into echoes of its own bizarre inhabitants, ultimately metamorphosing them into aberrations themselves. Now, as to the elusive location of the Far Realm, one might aptly surmise that it resides quite distantly removed from the confines of the prime material plane. The realm exists far beyond the elemental, astral, and even the outer planes within the grand tapestry of cosmology. There are parallels with the outer planes in that the Far Realm boasts multiple layers, perhaps an infinite number, occupying a spectrum of space, and at times even overlapping spaces. When grappling with the intricacies of planar layers, envision them through one of 2 lenses. In one interpretation, you might liken it to Dante Alighieri's depiction of hell in the Divine Comedy, where infernal realms stack on top of each other in a tiered structure. An alternative perspective is to liken it to contemporary multiverse theories, where various universes inhabit a multidimensional space, sharing dimensions either within the same vicinity or in close proximity. Should you find yourself wrestling with the conceptual complexity of this notion, you're in good company. Apparently, comprehending such an elaborate existence necessitates a level of intellect on par with that of a Mind Flayer. This very aspect aligns with why the origin of the Mind Flayer might be rooted in the Far Realm. While mortal minds struggle to grasp the Far Realm's essence, to an aberration like the Mind Flayer, it's akin to a familiar abode. Mind Flayers, in fact, traverse multiple dimensions, employing abilities like plane shift or astral projection to navigate other planes, whether physically or metaphysically. The Far Realm is often characterized as a plane of sheer madness, which intriguingly dovetails with another plausible theory of Illithid origin. Our third exploration delves into the realm of whispers and speculations within the intricate world of Eberron, a campaign setting that, I must emphasize, holds a special place as my personal favorite in the Dungeons & Dragons universe. In this context, it's rumored that the genesis of the Illithid lies in the hands of Durn the Corruptor. Strangely divergent from other tales, within Eberron, Mind Flayers are not self-serving entities, but rather subservient to Durn's enigmatic Delkir race. These Delkir entities emerge from the cryptic domain of Zoriat, an eerie realm shrouded in madness and unfamiliarity. Interestingly, it parallels the enigmatic Far Realm we've previously discussed. Indeed, one might contemplate the profound connection between Zoriat and the Far Realm, pondering if they're but different facets of the same perplexing plane. Within the confines of Eberron, the Illithid assumed roles as pawns to the Delkir invaders led by Deern, who infiltrated from Zoriat with aspirations of conquering the realm. Their efforts yielded substantial success, despite their eventual downfall, marked by the collapse of the goblinoid Dakani Empire due to this interplanar incursion. While the Delkir were ultimately defeated, their remnants endured, along with a myriad of aberrant entities. The fate of Durn remains shrouded in mystery, yet murmurs insinuate his entombment beneath the Earth's surface. A defining trait of the Delkir is their mastery over reality's very fabric, enabling them to twist the denizens of Eberron into their nightmarish aberrant designs. Such a capability naturally invites speculation that they could also be the architects behind the inception of the Mind Flayers. Intriguingly, ancient texts like the Astromundi Chronicles allude to Illithids having destroyed their creators and erased all traces of their existence, presenting yet another thread for conjecture regarding their origin. Eberron, standing apart from the rest of the realms, harbors a distinct history that potentially diverges from our earlier exploration of the Spelljammer lore surrounding the Illithid. A conceivable angle surfaces, Perhaps, when the interstellar Illithid Empire crumbled, these beings pursued a temporal reset and found themselves in Faerun through time manipulation. If so, could the Illithids of the Spelljammer cosmos actually hail from Eberron, a realm mostly uncharted? The temporal mechanics of the Far Realm and Zoriat defy linear logic, prompting speculation. Did the Illithid annihilate their Dalkir creators within Zoriat, while these same Dalkir persisted in Eberron's reality? Could the Far Realm, that was catalogued by the explorers and academia of Toril, be merely another iteration of Zoriat, absent of its Dalkir masters? Intricacies and uncertainties persist, woven into the very essence of the Illithid existence across the expansive tapestry of Dungeons & Dragons lore. The notion of time travel intertwines even deeper within the enigma of Mind Flayers, and underscored by the cryptic Sargon prophecies, an ancient script that chronicles Illithid worlds akin to those depicted in Spelljammer. In these ancient inscriptions, worlds are described as perpetually shrouded in nocturnal darkness, aligning with the concept of tidally locked Illithid worlds encountered in Spelljammer lore. Within the Sargon prophecies, an intricate tapestry of lore weaves an image of primordial society, comprised of superior eldritch beings, evoking parallels reminiscent of H.P. Lovecraft's haunting Call of Cthulhu. The Mind Flayers assume an analogous role of the enigmatic ancient Cyclopeans within this framework. Interestingly, the very name Sargon could potentially be a nod to Sargon of Akkad, a historical figure, perhaps an intentional endeavor to bring the realms of fantasy into reality. This notion gains credence from the premise that the Forgotten Realms bear a connection to Earth, thus fortifying the conception of the Illithids mirroring the Lovecraftian Cyclopeans, themselves inspired by real-world Cyclopean ruins. While such thematic parallels are customary within the realms of fiction, their resonance becomes even more intriguing due to the Forgotten Realms foundation as a universe of high fantasy coexisting alongside our own universe, albeit gradually fading from memory, hence forgotten. Without a doubt, this amalgamation of elements weaves a somewhat paradoxical origin narrative for the Mind Flayers. Yet, within the complex framework of canonical possibilities, these intricate layers coalesce into a coherent whole. The apex of this narrative expanse is amplified by the tantalizing notion that Lovecraft's mythos, particularly the Call of Cthulhu, could also find a canonical foothold within this intricate web. Should this expansive theory hold merit, Lovecraft's shadowy realm could potentially describe the enigmatic Illithid within our own world, an astonishing convergence of fictional domains. Now, if all that feels a bit overwhelming and bewildering, allow me to provide a concise summary. One theory posits that Dalkir, hailing from Zoriat, Eberron's counterpart to the Far Realm, created the Mind Flayers. Notably, the disconnection between Eberron and the Forgotten Realms mirrors Earth's detachment from the Forgotten Realms as well. This correlation raises the possibility that the Astra Mundi Chronicles' assertion of the Illithids eradicating their creators and all traces of them might indeed hold true, particularly from the perspective of realms that remain separate from Eberron. Subsequently, the Illithid venture to construct an interstellar empire that, alas, tumbles into ruin. In the aftermath, they opt for a cosmic do-over. The concept of time travel poses little hindrance to denizens of the Far Realm or Zoriat, given that the Far Realm experiences time uniquely. Thus, one rendition of the Far Realm, termed Zoriat, sees the Dalkir birthing the Mind Flayers, while another incarnation is devoid of the Dalkir's existence, an arrangement where both variants coexist simultaneously, paradoxically. In this elaborate web, the Mind Flayers navigate the temporal currents back to Faerun, a narrative unveiled within the Sargon prophecies. Their trajectory proceeds toward multiversal dominance, starting from the foundation, specifically the depths of the Underdark. Granted, this theory reaches far and wide, acknowledging its scope, yet its elegance stems from the fact that all components could be true, none could be true, or perhaps some truths lie embedded within. This convoluted confluence splendidly captures the essence of these tentacled entities, crafting, if you will, a symphony of bewildering enigma that defines the Illithid's nature. At the end of the day, these sons of squids are supposed to be Illithid, illicit confusion. They're aberrations, they're totally unrelatable. However, instead of neatly concluding this intricate tapestry, there's yet another notable origin story, the religious rendition. Within cities like Orindol, the Illithid deity Ilsensine is heralded as their progenitor. Ilsensine assumes the form of a disembodied tentacled brain, evoking shades of elder brains. This entity mirrors the essence of the Mind Flayers, potentially characterized as Machiavellian and inherently conceited. It's plausible that Ilsensine forged the Illithids with a hint of malice toward its divine peers, viewing their creations as insignificant and mere fodder for its intricate Illithid ambitions. Nevertheless, religious narratives in the Forgotten Realms tend to take precedence in the grand scheme of world design, but regardless, I can't help but feel they parallel religious stories in the real world. Events transpire in the distant past, followed by the emergence of a deity cult and its followers who take credit for those events. Ultimately, this perspective seems to provide a more simplistic explanation for a subject that's considerably more enthralling when steeped in enigma. And with that, let's end the origin speculation there and continue on to our next part for this video. Part 3. Illithid Society. We already touched on this in the previous 2 parts, but Illithid Society is a pretty touchy subject, so it's gonna require more touching on? In any case, we know the general structure of Illithid Society. It's a top-down structure, generally starting with the most powerful intellect, the Elder Brain, under which we find the Illitharid, then the Illithid, followed by the lesser Seramorphs, and finally the Thralls on the bottom. You may wonder why I don't include tadpoles on this hierarchy, and the main reason is because they aren't sentient. And so, how do they even have a place in the hierarchy of a society if they aren't even sentient? Well, you may argue, but they do have a place in society. That might be a fair point. However, that place cannot be social in nature, but we will get back to that later. Or not. We'll see. Illithids established vast subterranean cities within the intricate labyrinth of the Underdark, though they themselves seldom wielded pick and hammer for the task. Instead, they employed slaves and thralls to construct these enigmatic domains. Among the earliest and most potent of these cities was Orindil, a formidable city-state characterized by expansive caverns divided into various tiers. Ascending from the depths, the uppermost strata of Orindil was occupied by thrall caverns. Situated in the middle layer, the ring caverns formed the heart of the city. Here, most Illithids and Seramorphs resided, encapsulating the pulsating core of Orindil's existence. In contrast, the lower layer, known as the Undervaults, harbored the enigmatic Elder Brain, along with the city's extensive repository of knowledge. The hierarchical arrangement of tiers seamlessly mirrored the Illithid's values and priorities. Nestled at the base, the Elder Brain, a repository of unparalleled intellect, rested, symbolizing the pinnacle of societal importance. The reverence for knowledge, intellectual prowess, and wisdom was paramount. The middle layer was a bustling hub where ordinary Mind Flayers were engaged in daily affairs, encompassing slave markets, guild halls, and various enterprises. Serving as a protective buffer, the thralls ensnared in servitude occupied the lower echelons of society, serving as the workforce that buoyed the city's intricate mechanisms. The tiered structure encapsulated the core tenets of the Illithid society, with layers symbolizing power, knowledge, and the ceaseless machinery of their civilization. Illithid society was seemingly driven by a dual and relentless pursuit, the accumulation of knowledge and the thirst for world domination. While many might characterize the Illithids and their society as lawful evil, a closer examination reveals that the boundaries between chaotic and lawful become hazy when one considers the very essence of a creature reliant on the consumption of sentient life and the necessity of a sentient mind for reproduction. While undeniably evil from our human standpoint, the term cruel might more accurately encapsulate their existence, mirroring the harsh realities of nature itself. The pursuit of domination, serving as a central theme, is intricately intertwined with the Illithid's intrinsic nature, obliging them to subjugate the identity and essence of sentient beings to even propagate their own kind. Their life cycle provides a potential explanation for their innate ability to effortlessly enslave other creatures, coercing them into obedient servitude. This same impulse often leads them to subjugate entire communities, nations, or races, exploiting them as sources of sustenance, hosts for their parasitic tadpoles, or subjects for their macabre experiments. The Illithid's interaction with fellow beings is marked by an unsettling absence of empathy, a chilling stance that underscores their perception of themselves as evolved entities far superior to other sentient life forms. Meanwhile, in the vast expanse of space, the intricacies of Illithid society took on a distinct but somewhat analogous character. Illithids from the Spelljammer campaign setting, while retaining an underlying sinister undertone, displayed a penchant for secrecy, opting to maintain tenuous peace with neighboring settlements of various races. This ruse of coexistence veiled the true extent of their mind-controlling practices. Yet, despite their efforts, the reputation of Illithids as Mind Flayers, notorious for their brain-consuming tendencies, was not lost on the denizens of wild space and the known spheres. Among the crews of Illithid Spelljammer ships, exemplified by the enigmatic nautiloid featured in Baldur's Gate 3, a distinct dynamic emerged. These crews operated akin to lawless pirate vessels, where authority was achieved through successful mutiny, often leading to an ever-changing hierarchy. Upon successfully conquering a planet, the Illithids embarked on a process of terramorphing to align with their preferences. This transformation often included tidally locking the planet, plunging one hemisphere into perpetual darkness, a phenomenon briefly discussed in our earlier explorations of Origins. The predilection for cold and shadowy landscapes mirrored their affinity for subterranean environments, acting as a telltale sign of proximity to a Mind Flayer civilization. Notably, the spacefaring Illithids embraced trade as a cornerstone of their ethos, recognizing that achieving dominance over advanced species necessitated economic prowess and finesse, departing from the conventional notion of races being only useful as slaves or victims of mind flaying. The spelljamming Illithids acknowledged the potential of other races as valuable trading partners and potential allies. In this light, it becomes evident that Illithid society, while still orbiting around the core tenets of domination and knowledge acquisition, possesses a layer of complexity that may not be immediately apparent when juxtaposed in the more familiar mind flayers of the Forgotten Realms. And yet, all of the megalomania, subjugation, and domineering seemed to come from a twisted governing logic behind the Illithid action, that it was their job to bring order to a chaotic universe. It is for this reason that the Illithids sought to expand their empire across the entirety of the realms, and for this reason that they continue on their tenacious path, perhaps even traveling through time in the hopes of realizing their grand purpose. They saw themselves as the rightful savior rulers of all other lesser sentient beings. Part 4. Closing. In conclusion, the Illithids stand apart as one of the most menacing antagonists to whatever hapless adventurer comes across them. They are one of the most feared creatures in the Forgotten Realms Rogues Gallery, and have a plethora of variants that can come into play in a campaign that features them. If you didn't know much about Mind Flayers to begin with, or you found yourself learning about them from Stranger Things or Baldur's Gate 3, then at the very least, you know they are an incredibly versatile psychic menace. And that's all for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the Illithid, and hope to see you again soon. This is my first Dungeons & Dragons deep dive, and I hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, have fun and stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye!